All right, you want to talk to a guy who started a Ron DeSantis PAC? Why not? Let's have some fun. John Thomas, he's a Republican political strategist and the founder of Ron to the Rescue. John, welcome.
Good to be with you.
All right. So why Ron DeSantis? What makes you so jazzed about him as opposed to Greg Abbott or Kristi Noem or anyone else?
I mean, it's a great question. I think we have to step back and look at, Republicans and Democrats. Look, it's fun to have rallies. It's fun to organize our supporters. But at the end of the day, campaigns are about winning. That's fundamentally it. Because if your team doesn't win, they can't enact their agenda. And the Republicans for the last now 3 cycles at the federal level have been losing. What we expected a red wave was a red mist at best in November. And look, I think a lot of that falls at the feet of President Trump. For whatever reason, he has not been able to get our team across the finish line. And then juxtaposed to in November, there was a red tsunami in the state of Florida. Governor DeSantis not only dominated statewide, but he turned a classic swing state into a red state. And so we think that Ron DeSantis is the future of the Republican Party. He should be the Republican nominee, and he's best to take back the White House in 2024.
So John, you changed your mind a couple of times. For a little while, you thought maybe not do this PAC, and then after the midterms, you brought it back. So what made you change your mind?
Oh, well, it's a great question. Myself and a bunch of DeSantis supporters have for some time been thinking that perhaps Governor DeSantis would be the best equipped to be the Republican nominee. But when Donald Trump was raided, or the raids at Mar-a-Lago occurred, something switched in the Republican electorate at that moment in time, which is it turned former President Trump into a victim, and the Republican primary electorate was looking at him as a victim and rallying to his defense. And I'm not just talking about the ride or die MAGA people. I'm talking about the Mitch McConnells, the Kevin McCarthys, the Lindsey Grahams. The establishment of the Republican Party, as well as the grassroots, were standing tall behind Donald Trump because they thought he was treated unfairly. And it was at that moment I thought, you know what? Even if Governor DeSantis might be the future, now might not be the time. With one exception, and I said this at the time, which is if Donald Trump's primary picks in the midterm cycle mostly lost. And not only did that happen, but Governor DeSantis on the flip side had an absolute total victory in Florida. And so it was at that point that I thought, you know what? It's back on. DeSantis is the future. And you know what? I think I was right, because public polling has actually been pretty consistent since the midterms, which is Ron DeSantis is either leading or tied in almost every head-to-head matchup with Donald Trump. I think the Republican electorate has shifted. Not to say that they don't like Trump, they just want him to shift from a party leader to a party elder.
Yeah, I think the polling is a lot more mixed than that. But I'm curious, when you said you felt something switch when Mar-a-Lago was raided, other than the public figures talking about it, how could you tell?
Well, I mean, this is what I do for a living. I've worked in almost 49 states at this point. So we run. I'm a political strategist by trade. We run dozens of candidates each cycle. So we have our tentacles all over the United States. And so just in the course of doing our work for our clients, we were noticing that people were feeling sympathetic for the president, that perhaps the Department of Justice was slightly heavy-handed. And one way you can get people to rally to your side is when your team thinks you were unfairly treated. And that was largely the sentiment. And then of course we saw that play out in more right-wing media as well, that people were rallying behind Trump's defense. And then I even saw some internal polls about 2024 stack ups, and Trump's numbers popped in his favorability. So that was how I came to that conclusion.
It does happen often. I ran for Congress once, and when the New York Times attacked me unfairly, we raised $200,000 that day. In a congressional run, that was a huge amount in one day. So that leads me to ask the question, what do you think happens if Trump is indicted?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. I would ask myself, which is, does this turn him into the victim again and essentially box out any challengers? I'm not certain. I think it depends on what he's indicted for. So we'll have to look at that as whether or not the indictment is perceived to be fair or unfair. I think will largely dictate that.
Yeah, but that's okay. So look, this is informational. It's interesting. Obviously, you and I don't agree about politics or policy, but it's an interesting conversation about. But you're making it sound like Republican voters are rational, and that's absurd. No matter what he's indicted for, even if they had overwhelming evidence, if they had Trump on video selling nuclear secrets, every Republican would still rally to him. There's no way they would believe actual evidence.
I think you're wrong there. I think you're wrong there. Trump certainly has a ride or die base. The question is, how big is that base now? I think if you had asked that question in 2016, 2017, 2018, you might have been right. I think the electorate has shifted. They're looking for new alternatives. And the question is, where is Donald Trump's floor, right? Where is his base? I think it's probably 18 to 22% at this point. It used to be in the mid to high 30s. And that was a pretty strong domination of the Republican Party. I don't think he has that vice-like grip on the party. So the answer, I see it as, it depends.
Yeah, so John, what do you think his base?
I was gonna say, I think that, go ahead, sorry.
What do you think his floor is in the Republican primary, though?
Well, that's the big question. We'll find out over time. Some early polling I've seen in the last couple weeks, some internals we've seen from other camps has him at about 20 to 23%. Kind of that's the margin of error. If that's true, I think Donald Trump will lose the Republican nomination. If his floor is in the mid to high 30s, look, I think he can have a good shot at taking these winner-take-all states early on and essentially just get momentum and nobody can catch up. So that's the big question: is where is that floor? And we think it's in the low 20s.
John, I assume you're good at your job. I don't know the details, of course, but I assume it. But I can't imagine that Trump's floor in a Republican primary is in the 20s. That I can't. There's no world. I've never seen a poll where he didn't hold like 2/3 of Republicans super solidly, right? So you're saying he's going to dip all the way into the 20s, or that seems inconceivable.
Yeah. Well, I understand history certainly was that way, but what I would say is, look, when people are asked in most public polling, they're given, do you want Trump? Would you support Trump? There's no credible alternative. This is where DeSantis plays such an important role. If there's no credible alternative, historically, Republicans have lined up behind this president. But look, a poll just came out of New Hampshire by, I think it was the University of New Hampshire just today, that showed Governor DeSantis sitting in the high 40s and Trump sitting in the mid 30s in a head-to-head stack up. And that's not even including other slices of Republicans that could potentially eat into Trump's base. Look, what I'm saying is, I think former Trump supporters are looking for other things other than Trump. No, and something is interesting to take away. If you go back and you look at research back from 2016, a lot of people think that it was these ride or die people that would be with Donald Trump. This is his like mid 30, there's 30% of the vote that would vote for him no matter what, right? Didn't matter what he did, what he said, whether or not he was electable or not. That's actually incorrect as they self-reported it. Public polling has shown that there was almost a 1-for-1 matchup of people who both approved and liked of Donald Trump. They also thought he could win a general election. That's an important thing. Now we're seeing it shift. Voters who like Donald Trump are questioning whether or not he can beat a Joe Biden or whoever the Democrats put up. And I think that's a critical shift from 2016 to now.
Okay. I think if Ron DeSantis doesn't run when he's polling this well in the Republican primaries nationwide, he's got all of the right-wing, not all, but almost all the right-wing media behind him. He seems to have, in my opinion, the mainstream media behind him. He's got all the donors behind him. If he doesn't run under these circumstances, isn't he a bit of a coward?
I don't know if a coward, I mean, there's a lot of dynamics you would know as a former candidate. There's a lot of dynamics that go into a decision to run. I don't think that's appropriate, but certainly he would be missing his moment. This is his time. He's a sitting governor. He's coming off of very popular policy decisions, both in his state and with the Republican primary electorate. You're right, he is a bit of darling of the media at this moment. And he has the most powerful word in politics on the national stage, which is he's new. He's new, juxtaposed to Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who are not new. And so voters, especially Republican primary voters, if they're questioning of like, what are we going to do differently this go around so that we can win? Well, DeSantis's newness might just be what they lock onto.
So John, the reason I say coward is because I can't think of any reason he wouldn't run other than being scared that Donald Trump's gonna bully him. Like, I mean, you have all the momentum in the world. I mean, it's like almost handed to him on a silver platter. If you don't run, it's because you're scared of Trump, isn't it?
I've worked with candidates at every level, and it's a complicated decision matrix. I'm sure that might be one of the things. I don't think it was. Look, we know from DeSantis's tax returns, for instance, he's not a wealthy man at all. Perhaps his wife and his family are looking for a place that, like, hey, look, you need to provide for our kid. There are all these other reasons. But look, this is his moment. If he does not run now, there is no guarantee. In fact, it's unlikely that he will be in such a solid and strong position in 2028 because he won't be a governor. COVID will be a distant memory, hopefully at that point. And it's now or never. Look, that's why we launched the SuperPAC, because what we're doing at this point is harnessing the energy and laying the groundwork and infrastructure for the governor so that when he does decide to run, and we believe he will, that he hasn't lost any time, because Trump is the only candidate right now. So we're gonna do all the organizing and then hand over the infrastructure to the governor so that he can hit the ground running. Look, we think he's gonna run, so we'll see if we're right.
So John, I'm curious how you read the tea leaves, because a lot of folks say, no, sit this one out. You don't wanna get bloodied by Trump. Come back in the next one and you'll win. I mean, I think that's a terrible idea. I think that, who knows, maybe another Republican beats Trump in the primary and then you're toast. You're never to be seen again, right? So especially if they win the presidency. So, but I haven't seen any indication from DeSantis which way he's gonna go. Have you seen any indication?
I'm pretty confident he's gonna run. The biggest indicator is just the fact that he's top of the polls right now and that he constantly keeps himself in the national press. I mean, that's not on accident. That takes work. So it isn't, you don't, especially when you're not up for re-election, you don't, as they say, you stick your head up, people are gonna take shots at you unless there's a reason for him to stay relevant. And I think he wants to stay relevant and he wants to keep putting his agenda out there because he's positioning smartly for a presidential primary. But look, he's having a moment. These don't happen very often in presidential politics. In fact, it happens almost never to most aspiring presidential candidates. I do think that there's a lane for somebody who's not Trump, but it's a delicate lane and tightrope to walk. And I think DeSantis starts out with a big brand and name ID, which is very valuable. He's a proven fundraiser. In this last cycle, he raised over $200 million for his gubernatorial reelect, which means he can compete at the presidential level. He's got all of the components. And I would say that people think, Trump is a force to be reckoned with, and he steamrolled everybody in 2016. But I do want to remind you, in 2016, Trump was largely left alone in the primary until the very end when John Kasich ran hard against Trump, because everybody thought mistakenly that Trump was beatable. So everybody in the Republican Party primary wanted to be the second position to Trump because they thought they could topple Trump. That's not going to happen this time around. Trump is going to get the front runner treatment. And that means everybody's going to pick on him at the debates. He's going to get the ad wars against him. Like, this is not going to go well for him. And then compound with, if I'm right, and I think I am, I think the electorate shifted and is looking for an alternative to Trump right now.
All right, last thing here. By the way, I would love to see Republicans attacking Trump in a debate. I would be shocked if that happened. Look, okay. So let's see what happens, John. Maybe we'll have you back on afterwards to
love to.
If there's debates, et cetera, to see, because I think they're so scared of Trump. I think they're all deathly afraid of him. And so the idea that these guys who are not known for their courage are going to take on Donald Trump in a Republican primary debate, okay, All right. I mean, I hope so. I want it, but I'd be super surprised. Anyways, but last thing, I want to ask about your polling. So in the Democratic primaries, people are obsessed with electability because they watch mainstream media. Mainstream media tells them never vote for progressives. They're never going to win. They're never going to. You got to vote for the most conservative Democrat. And they get people to like. So I would say, very, very roughly, like that's 80% of the consideration for a Democrat in a primary. Who's going to win? The policies, they love progressive policies, but they never vote for the progressives because Anderson Cooper's got them convinced that only the conservative Democrat can win. How is it for the Republicans? Like electability that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, electability is a box to check, but it's not. I know the dynamic you're talking about in Democratic primaries. It's nowhere near as strong as a prevailing force in Republican primaries. But you have to, the Republican primary electorate needs to believe you can win, but it's more important about your identity and your policies than electability. So we kind of have the reverse problem. So consequently, very often we elect people that in fact do have an electability issue. But there appears to be a thirst with Republican primary voters to get back to winning. And we're even seeing it in our PAC organizing. We're getting a lot, for instance, in New Hampshire, we're at an event tomorrow in New Hampshire. Trump's going to be speaking, but it's a state GOP event. And a lot of former party leaders are coming and jumping on the DeSantis train. And these were Trump supporters. They're now leaving it. And their main reason, electability. So perhaps things are shifting in our own electorate.
All right, John Thomas, Republican strategist and pollster and the founder of Ron to the Rescue. Thanks for joining us, we appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.